Good evening. We are going to continue on in our little short sermon series called Anything and Everything and talk about a different phrase. Last week we spent some time talking about how you do anything is how you do everything. That phrase and the truth of it and looking at it from a biblical viewpoint. Tonight I want to talk about one that is a little bit more a step on my toes-ish. It's a problem that I deal with particularly, so much so that my wife actually bought me a plaque and stuck it on my desk one day because she was so tired of telling me the same thing, because in her wisdom, it's something I need to be reminded of quite a bit, which is the phrase, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. There's a lot of truth to that statement. We talk about that idea in a lot of different ways. You can talk about it from a more economical viewpoint with a phrase called opportunity cost. I want to talk about it from a biblical perspective tonight, obviously. But I think there is a great power and a great clarity that comes from wrestling with this idea and thinking about the ideas of just what our limitations are and how we set the right limitations in order to allow ourselves to choose the right things to do as we move forward in our lives. Honestly, we've all probably been brought up with this idea that you live a life that has no limits, that you can do anything you want to do. We raise our children with that idea of you can grow up and be anything you want to be. You can learn the skills and practice the skills that will allow you to accomplish anything you want to accomplish. And I know that there's some truth to that. That is not entirely true, to be honest. Now, there is a sense in which when you start your life and you are making the choices for your life, and especially as a young person, that you have limitless options, it seems. You can choose any career. It doesn't matter what you want to do, you can work toward that goal. Now, how far you go toward that goal, there can be a lot of things that play in that. But you can choose. If you want to be president of the United States, I don't know why anybody would, but if you wanted that job, you could take the steps and make the decision and choose the educational trajectory that will lead you that direction. If you want to be some sort of specialized scientist, if you want to be a successful writer, if you want to be a doctor, it doesn't matter what you want to do, you can essentially choose your future. Because all of the choices in front of you make that future possible. You get to make the choice of every decision, and you get to plan what that future looks like. Now, for those of us who are older, we realize there are some limitations on that. Okay? Because when we tell our children that, we don't tell them about all the obstacles that are going to show up in the way. Because we don't know what those obstacles will be. And there are a lot of variables in life that limit us. There are going to be people that come into our life that cause difficulties that you have to overcome. There'll be extra struggles and battles you have to go through. There are other ways, excuse me, there are other ways in which you might not really have certain options. I'm 5'10" and a half. I am not going to go on a basketball court in the NBA and be able to keep up with these guys who are 7'2", 7'3", 7'4". All they got to do is just put their hand up in front of me and I can't do anything because their hand is as broad as one side of a basketball. I mean, there are certain physical limitations I will have because of the body that God has given me, right? And so there are times when your body will limit you. There are times when your intelligence might limit you. Now, a lot can be said for hard work, but there are also circumstances of life that limit us. The other thing, and this is where we come back to the phrase, we've got limits more and more of them as you progress in life. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, just on Friday night, Joy looked at me with this look of, oh, son, you don't even know what's coming. Because I made the comment of, I'm feeling old. And Joy gave me that look. There's truth to that. A lot of truth to that. There's a lot of truth to, what I could do as a 20-year-old, I cannot do as a 42-year-old. My knee is hurting like I don't know how to describe it right now, because I decided this past Monday I was going to go take an easy run and yank something in my knee. And I didn't run the rest of the week. But it's just one of those, there are limitations that start showing up the older and further you get along. There are also limitations because of the choices you've already made. Because every time, and this is where the phrase really hits home, every time you choose something, you are eliminating something. And so what used to be true, you can do anything, but you cannot do everything. Every time you choose something, you are narrowing down everything. You're making it smaller. Every time you make a choice, you are putting yourself into a smaller future. And that's the way life works. That is why our choices matter, because choices set up the future we want, and hopefully our choices will reflect the future we're shooting for, because they will limit us. As you start making decisions, you are literally placing limits on your life in every decision that you make. Turn with me over to Deuteronomy 30. Deuteronomy 30. Start in verse 11. This command I give you today is certainly not too difficult or beyond your reach. It is not in heaven so that you have to ask who will go up to heaven and get it for us and proclaim it so that we might follow it. And it is not across the sea so that you have to ask who will go across the sea and get it for us and proclaim it to us so that we may follow it. But the message is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, so that you may follow it. See, today I have set before you your life and prosperity, death and adversity. For I am commanding you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commands, statutes, and ordinances, so that you may live and multiply, and the Lord your God may bless you in the land you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away, and you do not listen, and you're led astray to bow and worship to other gods and serve them, I tell you today that you will certainly perish and will not prolong your days in the land you are entering to possess across the Jordan. I call heaven and earth as witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live. Love the Lord your God, obey him, and remain faithful to him. For he is your life, and he will prolong your days as you live in the land the Lord swore to give to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now here, they're being asked by Moses to make a choice. Choose which way you're going to go. I'm giving you the choice of life and death, blessings and curse. I'm giving you the choice of a life of prosperity, or I'm giving you a choice of a life of adversity. You get to choose which future you want. By the choices you make, by your willingness to obey God, by your willingness to fulfill God's plan for your life, you are choosing which end you will have. Well, the same is true for us. We choose a direction in our life, and that direction leads to a particular future. And if we choose the right thing, then we will have the right future, the one we want. And if we choose poorly, we will have the bad future, the one that we do not want. When we use up our time, because that's what we do, Every day you live, you have one less day to live. I know that sounds so morbid. It's not for the child of God. Understand that. But every day you live, you have now used up one of those days on this earth that you have in front of you. Every choice you made is narrowed down to this future you are putting in front of you. Even when circumstances end up pushing you in one direction or another, maybe it's some situation you're in, maybe somebody has treated you poorly, maybe there is some tragedy in your life, maybe there is a financial difficulty you're suddenly facing. There can be all sorts of circumstances of life. We are still left with, what are we going to do with the circumstances? Are we going to let this pull us away from the future we are choosing, or are we going to stay on course? That's our option. But every day you live, you get closer and closer to that future, but you also narrow down what that looks like. You can almost picture this like a telescope. Just recently, in the past couple of weeks, we've pulled out our telescope that we've had stored in our basement, and we've looked at, I can't remember what all, Jupiter, Saturn, those were the two we looked at. It was really kind of cool to see the ring. You can barely see it, but you could see the ring around Saturn. It was kind of cool to see. We looked at the moon the other night. But what I've noticed is, you go out there and I go out there in the dark and I kind of put the telescope exactly where it needs to be. What we're looking at is right dead center in the middle of the scope. I run in and I tell the kids, all right, telescope's ready. And they come out, and you know what they say as soon as they look into the telescope? There's nothing there. Why? Probably because they bumped it, if we're being honest. But even if they hadn't bumped the telescope, do you know why there's nothing there? It moved. It moved. Because when you look into a telescope, if I'm not looking in a telescope, I can see the whole span of the sky. But when I look into the telescope, it is narrowing down my focus to one little spot in the sky, and that's all I can see. That's kind of how life is. Life, as you live it, narrows down into that one specific spot that you were trying to get to from the very earliest of ages. The earlier you learn to do that, the more likely you are to get where you want to get to. But as you live life, it narrows down. That's what Moses is saying here. Choose now what you're going to do. Choose today what future you want, and then make the choices that get you from where you are to where you want to be. That's the goal. That's what we're supposed to do as God's people. Proverbs chapter 3. Well-known proverb here. Verse 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways know him, and he will make your path straight. You trust in God. You do things God's way. God keeps you on that path that gets you exactly where you want to get to. That's what we're supposed to do. Proverbs chapter 16, verses 1 through 9 gives a lot of specific examples of what those kind of decisions look like. Reflections of the heart belong to mankind, and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. All a person's ways seem right to him, but the Lord weighs motives. Commit your activities to the Lord, and your plans will be established. He has prepared everything for his purpose, even the wicked for the day of disaster. Everyone with a proud heart is detestable to the Lord. Be assured he will not go unpunished. Iniquity is atoned for by loyalty and faithfulness, and one turns from evil by the fear of the Lord. When a person's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Better is a little with righteousness than great income with injustice. A person's heart plans his way, but the Lord determines his steps. Over and over and over again, just in that one little section of Scripture, how many times does it remind us that it is God's way that leads us where we want to go? This one's not on the screen, but Isaiah chapter 30. Isaiah chapter 30. I love this particular image. Starting in verse 19, for people will live on Zion and Jerusalem. You will never weep again. He will show favor to you at the sound of your outcry. As soon as he hears, he will answer you. The Lord will give you meager bread and water during oppression, but your teacher will not hide any longer. Your eyes will see your teacher, and whenever you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear this command behind you. This is the way. Walk in it. Then you will defile your silver-plated idols and your gold-plated images. You'll throw them away like minstrel cloth and call them filth. This idea of, you know what? If we will listen to the voice of God, if we will follow God's path, if we will let God narrow down our future, God will stand behind us essentially and cheer us on. He'll stand behind us and kind of say in our ears, hey, keep going, that's the right way. No, not to the left, keep going straight. Yeah, keep going, that's where you want to get to, not to the right, no, that's straight. It's like, we used to play this game in our teen things where you would take a young person and they would be blindfolded, and the task was to get them through a certain obstacle course blinded. Now, you couldn't touch them, but you could talk to them. And so you would give them verbal commands. All right, take 3 steps forward. All right, make sure you keep walking straight. No, you're going to the left. Keep going straight. Go straight. And you're trying to walking through what God does for us. Now, what made the game interesting is that we also allow all the other kids to shout and give the wrong commands. And so your job as a blindfolded teenager was to find the right voice and listen to only it amongst all the other voices. Y'all get the illustration? Now here we've got God, who is the right voice, who's in our ear saying, hey, go this way, keep going straight, no, not to the left, keep going. And then we got all the other voices in the world trying to pull us away from that. The choice we have is whose voice we're going to listen to. Whose voice are we going to hear? Whose voice, whose words are we going to obey? Because if we'll obey God's voice, he'll get us to the future we want. That's what happened. Here's the other problem, though. What if we start listening to the wrong voice? What if the voice we're listening to isn't telling us to go on the straight path, but it's trying to veer us off to the right somewhere? The more we veer off to the right, our future is still narrowing. It's still getting smaller. It's just going to end in the wrong place. That's why it's important to make those decisions. That's why this phrase is important. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. So because I can't do everything, I need to choose the thing that I want in the end and let that be my focus. One thing I love about Hebrews chapter 11 is as you go through Hebrews chapter 11, this isn't a list of perfect people. It's not a list of people who did everything righteously. It's not even, I wouldn't argue, those who are heroes of the faith. Because there are certainly people in this list that I would not claim to be heroes. What we have, though, is a list of examples for us of people who chose to trust God. And the question I always like to ask is, well, what if they didn't? You start going through the list and you look at Adam. What if Adam didn't trust God? Now, we know when he didn't, what happened? The fall of mankind, all the bad stuff that we see. You've got that choosing sin and then all the consequences that come from that. What about Noah? What if Noah decided to not trust God? We wouldn't be here. What if Abraham decided to not trust God? God said, get up and go and I'll give you these blessings. And he said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm comfortable where I'm at. What about Moses? Moses tried to take things into his own hands and rescue his people by his own power, and it didn't work out. And so then, 40 years later, he's in the wilderness. He sees the burning bush. God says, I want you to get up and go. I want you to go rescue my people. And Moses tried to say no. He could have held to that. The story would have been very different. What about David? David weren't a man after God's own heart. If David had followed the same path that Saul did before him, what about Jesus? What if Jesus said, you know what, these people aren't worth it? His father felt that way a couple of times. As you go through the Old Testament, there's not a problem with believing that Jesus could have come to the same conclusion, because we aren't worth it. But he felt we were. You know, they used their faith to choose the right thing, and it set up a future for them. That's what we do. And what you find is, as you go through this process and you start realizing every decision I make, if it is going to make a difference as to whether I am on that straight and narrow path that the Scriptures teaches about, well, then every decision I make now becomes a decision that affects the future, which makes every decision a big deal. It makes every decision worth thinking about. It makes every decision worth praying about. It makes every decision a spiritual decision. And I think sometimes we don't realize just how true that is. But the way I respond to that neighbor who won't ever trim their tree, and it's dropping all sorts of filth in my yard that I got to clean up week after week, and I'm frustrated with it, and then finally their dog came over and messed up my flower bed, and I've had it, and we're going to go have word, and I'm going to say things that I know I shouldn't say, but they need to hear it, and therefore I'm going to let them. You think that has spiritual repercussions? Yeah. It absolutely does. I'll be honest, I think you could probably make an argument that every decision we make, big or little, has spiritual ramifications, and we need to treat them that way. Even to the point of what I choose to wear today can have spiritual effects. And so, while yes, I can do anything, I can't do everything. Let me take that a little bit of a different direction here. Okay, in one sense, we talk about that in the future has limitless options, but you've just got to choose which one you want to focus on. Let me take it a little bit of a different direction. I can do anything. I have the option to do anything. But because of God, I no longer have the option to do anything. Not everything is on the table for me if I'm trying to please God. I don't have the option to watch every single one of the 150 channels that come through on my TV. We don't really have 150 channels, but if we did, I don't really have the option to watch probably most of them most of the time because of the content that is on the channel. So while I have tons of options, if I'm following God, I really only have a few. I have tons of options for life, but honestly, I really only have a few. I have a limitless possible career options in front of me, but the truth is, if I'm following God, I really only have a few. Because God puts limits in our lives. And so, while we have on one side of this, you have to make choices that are going to essentially limit all your other options, you also have a God who has limited your options. And we got to be okay with that. The truth is, we cannot do everything. When we choose to do something, we are eliminating some of those options. When we choose the world, we are eliminating the kingdom. You ever thought about that? And that's exactly what James is talking about over in James chapter 4. James says, "Oh, you adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? So whoever wants to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God." If I want to be friendly with the world, if I want to fit in with the world, if I want to be just like the world, if I want the world to love me because I love the world, I want to have this friendship, this relationship, this dependency on the world, on society, on social values, on all the things the world has to offer. When that's where I put my focus, you know what I've done is I have chosen that as opposed to the kingdom. Because the Bible's clear that you can't have both. Over in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, no one can serve two masters. Either he will love the one and hate the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon. You just can't. They are mutually exclusive opportunities. So while in a sense, yes, you can do anything, but you can't do everything, when you choose one thing, you are eliminating all the other options. And so when I choose the kingdom, I have now excluded the world. It doesn't mean I don't still live in the world. It doesn't mean I don't have contact with the world. It doesn't mean that I'm not building relationship with people who aren't yet part of the kingdom. But my focus for living now becomes the kingdom, not the world. My focus for desire and fulfillment becomes the kingdom, not the world. My purpose now becomes kingdom purpose, not the world. And that's hard for us to wrap our brain around, but that's just the reality of decision making. We have no problem with that when we say, okay, on my schedule today, I agreed to go and meet with the principal of the local school at 10 o'clock, and I'm supposed to be there from 10 until 10:45 for a meeting. Okay, you know what that means? I can't do any other thing from 10 to 10:45. I have a meeting. Agreeing to that one thing eliminated the 1,000 of other options that I could have done during that hour. We have no problem with it when it comes to scheduling. But we've got to realize that there is the same truth when it comes to lifestyle, when it comes to kingdom living, when it comes to belonging to Christ. You know, when we choose the secular, we are typically eliminating the spiritual. When I choose to engage in just purely secular activity, I'm not saying sinful. I'm saying just something that is purely focused on secular things. When I choose to, yesterday I sat down and I watched a football game. I chose to do something secular. But I also chose by watching that game to not engage in spiritual things for that period of time. That was the choice I made. I'm not saying it's a wrong choice, but it is a choice I made, and we need to consider that. If what I often choose is secular, which means I am often eliminating the spiritual, can you see how that could lead to problems? And so we need to be the kind of people who realize, yes, you can do anything, but you cannot do everything. That when you choose something, you are eliminating other things. When we choose self, we eliminate God. When I choose to do what is purely for me, for my benefit, for my joy, for my pleasure, for my passions and my desires, I am often choosing to please self instead of God. We got to be cautious with that. That does not mean we have to live a life of debasement. That does not mean we have to live a life of misery. That as long as we're miserable, God is happy. That is taught anywhere in Scripture, and actually quite the contrary is taught. God wants us to enjoy things in life. That I can choose to serve God, which then serves me, as opposed to serving me, which rarely leads to serving God. It's just a matter of perspective in the way I do things. You know, what we've got to do as Christians is we need to learn to consider the cost of our decisions. When I choose something, I am eliminating everything else. It's just a reality of life. It's something that we all live with, and it's something that we all have to make decisions about every single day. I encourage you this week, just as a practical point, think about your week. We typically do that, right? Come Sunday, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, sometime maybe some of us wait till Monday morning, but we consider what we're going to do for the week. We think about our schedule. Some of us are a little more organized with those schedules than others are. Some of us have to be. Some of us don't have to be. I would encourage you to sit down and look at your schedule this week. How much of your schedule is focused on the world, focused on the secular, and focused on self? How much of it? Versus how much of your schedule is focused on the kingdom, focused on the spiritual, and focused on God? Every time we plan for something, we are eliminating everything else. Because you cannot, although you can do anything, you cannot do everything. Remember that as you think about the life you're building and the future you want. Also remember that if you've got a clear picture of the future that you want, what you want to see happen, where you want to end up when you die, that is a very focused future, and it requires us to constantly make decisions that get us there. Are you making those decisions? Is that your guiding light, your North Star? Is that what you're pursuing if you are truly trying to serve God and do things His way? You only have so many options. Use them for Him. If you're not a child of God, I encourage you to become one tonight. That might be the step you got to take to get on this right path to go where you need to go. If you don't belong to God, I can guarantee you are not on the right path. So become a child of God. Be baptized and have your sins washed away so that you can belong to Him and be a part of His kingdom. And He can be that one behind you going, no, not to the left, not to the right. Go straight. This is the way. This is the path. This is the way you need to go. Keep going. He will do that for you when you are one of His children. If you need the invitation to get your life right and become a child of God, let us know as we stand and sing this song.